I'm David Miller, and at 39, I'm the founder of Terraform Interiors. It's a sustainable design firm I poured everything into, every drop of sweat, every last dollar, and a significant piece of my soul to build it from the ground up. Right now, I'm in my Seattle office watching the familiar Washington rain trace paths down the glass. The steady gray rhythm of it always seems to pull my thoughts back to one specific day, almost exactly a year ago. My younger brother Liam's ridiculously lavish birthday celebration. That was the moment the ground shifted beneath my feet. It was the day the curtain was pulled back and I finally understood that to my own family I was just a ghost haunting the edges of their brilliant sun-drenched world. But to really get why that day cut so deep, you have to see where I came from. Picture a quiet boy, always lost in a sketchbook, his head full of shapes and light. I grew up surrounded by people whose futures in law and finance were mapped out from birth. My path, the one I was drawing for myself, was the only one that didn't seem to be on their map. It feels like a story best told over coffee. So wherever you are, pull up a chair. Let's pretend we're in some warm, quiet cafe here in Seattle, the scent of roasted beans in the air as I lay it all out for you. Let me show you how it all started. I can still hear the steady drum of rain on the roof of our two-story house in the Seattle suburbs where my childhood unfolded. It was a summer afternoon in 1999. I was 13, completely lost in my own world on the living room carpet, my sketchbook open wide across my lap. My pencil was working furiously to capture an idea for a chair that was anything but ordinary. It looked more like a pod from a sci-fi movie, all smooth, flowing lines and legs that seemed to ripple like water. The spell was broken when Liam, my 10-year-old brother, exploded into the room. He was a whirlwind of energy, his face bright red and shiny with sweat from shooting hoops in the driveway. "David, come on! Play with me," he gasped. A huge smile spread across my face. Without a second thought, I slapped the sketchbook shut and was on my feet, chasing him back out the door. How could I say no? Back then, Liam and I were an unbreakable team. We were allies, two brothers whose bond was forged during long family trips to the Washington coast, where we'd spend hours engineering elaborate sand forts and daring each other to run from the waves until our mom's voice called us back for supper. You could have called us a typical middle-class family, but that label never quite fit the reality. It felt too modest. My father, Thomas Miller, was a powerhouse, a highly respected lawyer who ran one of Seattle's most prominent family law firms. He was an imposing figure, a man whose deep voice commanded attention in any room, and whose piercing gaze felt less like a father's and more like a judge's. You always felt like you were being weighed and measured. My mother, Eleanor, was a force of nature in her own right, a whirlwind of community activism, constantly dashing between charity galas and city council meetings. She had a public-facing, radiant smile that could charm anyone, but underneath it was a core of pure steel, a resolve focused entirely on advancing my father's career. They were two sides of the same polished, powerful coin. And then there was me, with my head in the clouds and my hands covered in graphite, a strange, smudged drawing that didn't belong in their pristine portrait of a family. As a kid, I was completely blind to the slow, silent drift that was beginning to separate Liam and me. For so long, our world had been one of shared confidences, of splitting the last of Mom's freshly baked cookies, of an unspoken alliance against the world. But as the teenage years crept in, my universe began to shrink down to the pages of my sketchbook. I became obsessed, pouring all my time into my designs, dreaming up fantastical furniture that didn't exist. I imagined coffee tables that could accordion into a flat panel on the wall and armchairs that tilted and spun with the freedom of an amusement park ride. Liam, meanwhile, was drawn to the opposite world. He lived for the thrill of debate, sharpening his wits in verbal duels with his friends. His favorite pastime was listening, rapt, as Dad recounted his courtroom triumphs over dinner, detailing the strategies behind his biggest cases. "One day I'm going to be a lawyer just like Dad," Liam announced with absolute certainty when he was 14. That declaration earned him a proud, approving nod from our father and a smile from our mother that lit up her entire face. I was sitting right there, a half-eaten piece of steak forgotten in my mouth. My head dropped, my eyes fixed on my lap as I reflexively sketched a new, arcing line onto a napkin. Of course he will, I thought. The chasm between us only widened when it was time for college. My choice to study product design at a local Seattle university felt like a betrayal. It wasn't Harvard or Yale, the hallowed halls Dad had envisioned for his sons. "Design?" he scoffed, the words hitting me with the chill of an October downpour. "That's a hobby, David. It's not a career." Mom tried to soften the blow, but her disappointment was a tangible thing in the room. "Oh, David," she'd said, her voice laced with a gentle pity that was almost worse than Dad's anger. "You're so intelligent. You could be a doctor, a lawyer. Anything. Why would you pick something so uncertain?" I tried to make them understand. I explained that design wasn't just idle sketching, that my dream was to create things that could genuinely improve people's lives, to change the very spaces they inhabited. But the look in their eyes told me everything I needed to know. My words were just noise. They simply didn't believe. Liam, on the other hand, was set on the golden path. He was sent to the University of Washington School of Law, our father's alma mater. My parents covered every penny of his tuition, bought him a tidy little apartment near campus, and Dad proudly paraded him around, introducing him to all the heavyweights in the city's legal circles. I'll never forget the family dinner where I tried to share some good news. I'd just won an award for a design project at my university. My announcement was met with polite nods before Dad turned the conversation. "Liam has real potential," he boomed, a proprietary pride in his voice. "He's going to take over the firm someday." I felt a lump form in my throat, and the mashed potatoes I was eating suddenly tasted like grit. The favoritism wasn't just spoken, it was a constant, suffocating presence. After I graduated, I packed my bags for Portland, determined to make it on my own. I landed a job at a small design firm, earning a salary so meager it barely covered the rent on my dilapidated one-bedroom apartment. Those early years were a blur of 70, sometimes 80-hour work weeks. I would sketch until my vision blurred and my eyes felt raw, pouring my entire being into my work, only to have clients dismiss my ideas, complaining that a table was too contemporary or a chair was impractical. It was soul-crushing. Meanwhile, Liam was being set up for success by our parents. They helped him buy a beautiful house in a nice Portland suburb and gifted him a brand new car to go with it. "Liam needs these things to project a professional image," my mother explained matter-of-factly when I gently questioned the disparity. I just nodded, letting it go. What was the point of arguing? But a cold, heavy feeling settled in my chest, and for the first time, I started to seriously wonder if I was just a visitor in my own family. When I turned 30, I made a move that my parents openly called insane. I founded Terraform Interiors. My vision was to create a company dedicated to sustainable furniture, using reclaimed and recycled materials to build pieces that were both stunningly beautiful and environmentally conscious. I took out a terrifyingly large bank loan, found a tiny office in Portland's gritty industrial zone, and threw myself into the work with a maniacal focus. For the first few months, my life was the business. I slept on a lumpy sofa in the office to save every penny, my diet consisting of instant ramen and lukewarm coffee. I remember calling my parents, my voice tight with exhaustion and hope, desperately wishing for a single word of encouragement, anything to keep me going. But my father's only response was a cold warning. "If this venture of yours fails, David, don't come to us looking for a bailout." My mother on the other end of the line was silent for a beat before asking a few hollow, obligatory questions. Then, as if my entire life's gamble was a trivial matter, she smoothly changed the subject to a recent lawsuit Liam had won. I hung up the phone feeling completely and utterly alone, as if the entire world had collectively decided I wasn't worth their time. But Terraform Interiors didn't fail. It was the opposite. After 2 grueling years of barely scraping by, I perfected a line of recycled furniture that was truly unique. I designed tables built from reclaimed barnwood, chairs upholstered in a surprisingly soft fabric woven from recycled plastic fibers, and lighting fixtures crafted from beautifully reshaped glass bottles. My work began to get noticed. High-end hotels and buzzworthy new restaurants around Portland started calling. Then came the day that changed everything. I got a call from a massive hotel corporation. They wanted to place an order for 50 full sets of my tables and chairs for a new flagship location. I remember standing in the middle of my small office, phone pressed to my ear, and letting out a whoop of pure, unadulterated joy that made my few employees jump. That was it. That was the moment I knew I had finally made it. My first instinct was to share the news. I called my mom, my voice buzzing with excitement as I told her about the enormous contract. "That's nice, David," was all she said, her tone as flat and lifeless as a dial tone. The air went right out of me. "But have you heard? Liam just made partner at Dad's firm." I ended the call, the triumphant smile sliding right off my face. It was like running full speed into a brick wall. Family get-togethers became exercises in feeling invisible. I remember one Christmas dinner vividly. Dad stood up, glass in hand, to propose a toast. He launched into a lengthy, glowing tribute to Liam, who had just closed a case worth a fortune. The whole table burst into applause. Mom was practically incandescent with pride, and Liam sat there, soaking it all in with a self-satisfied smirk. I was way down at the other end of the table, my own major news burning on my tongue. Terraform had just landed a contract with a national hotel chain, a deal that would put us on the map. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, Dad had already turned back to Liam, eagerly asking about his strategic plans for expanding the firm. I shut my mouth and went quiet, staring down at my plate, prodding my food with my fork. I felt like a stranger who'd been invited by mistake. Liam, of course, was living the life they had always imagined for him. He drove a gleaming Porsche, lived in a sprawling, opulent house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, and was consistently introduced by our parents as the heir to the Miller family legacy. Every single one of Liam's accomplishments, no matter how minor, was treated like a monumental victory. "Liam just signed a huge new client," Dad would declare at a family dinner, completely oblivious to the fact that I was sitting right there holding the Innovative Entrepreneur of the Year award I'd just been given by the Seattle Business Alliance. "Hello? I'm right here," I'd think. But the words never came out. A quiet, corrosive question began to eat away at me. Would I ever be enough for them? This constant, blatant favoritism was like a low-grade poison, but I kept showing up. I kept trying. I loved them even when that love felt like a raw, open wound that refused to heal. I went to every holiday, sent thoughtful birthday gifts, and held on to a sliver of hope that one day my parents would finally turn to me and say the words I longed to hear. "David, we are so proud of you." But that day never came. Instead, Liam's 35th birthday arrived, rolling in like a dark storm cloud, threatening to obliterate the fragile peace I had tried so hard to build. The Seattle drizzle was still coming down as I drove toward the Fairmont Olympic, a breathtakingly grand hotel in the center of downtown. This was the stage Liam had chosen for his 35th birthday spectacle, I had on a charcoal gray suit, something I pulled out of my closet so infrequently it still felt stiff. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, it was more of a defensive measure. I knew tonight was Liam's show, a grand performance with him as the star. All I wanted was to blend in, to not give anyone another reason to see me as the odd one out. Tucked inside my jacket pocket was a small velvet-lined box. Inside was a fountain pen I had spent the better part of a week making for him by hand. The body was carved from a piece of reclaimed oak, and I had painstakingly engraved his name into the silver clip. It felt like more than a gift. It was a peace offering, a tangible way to say that no matter how wide the gulf between us had grown, I was still his big brother. Traffic had been a nightmare, so I got to the hotel later than I'd intended. The party was already in full swing, a sea of glittering dresses and dark suits. I found the check-in table and gave my name to the hostess, a young woman with a polite, practiced smile. Her eyes scanned the list before she gestured vaguely toward a far corner of the opulent ballroom. "Your table is over there, Mr. Miller," she said, her gaze already moving past me to the next guest. I just nodded and began to make my way through the throng, doing my best to ignore the fleeting, curious looks from people I didn't recognize. Walking into the grand ballroom felt like stepping into another world. Crystal chandeliers, massive and intricate, glittered like constellations overhead, casting a fractured, brilliant light across the polished marble floors. The air was filled with the smooth, mellow sound of a live jazz trio, and the sweet perfume of hundreds of white roses was laced with the rich scent of expensive wine. The room was packed. There must have been 200 people there, a glittering ocean of designer gowns and bespoke suits. I saw a few faces I knew, partners from my father's firm, well-known figures from the Seattle business community, even a journalist from the Seattle Times. A cold realization washed over me. This wasn't just a birthday party, it was a power play, a meticulously staged event designed to flaunt Liam's success. It was a victory lap for his latest win, a massive class-action lawsuit that had netted the firm a settlement in the millions. That case had been everywhere. You couldn't escape it in Seattle. It was all over the local news channels and splashed across every major publication. There were deep-dive articles in the Puget Sound Business Journal and endless chatter about it on social media, with clips of Liam's press conferences going viral on YouTube. I'd followed the whole thing, of course. How could I not? Liam had been the lead attorney for Evergreen Development, a massive real estate conglomerate with deep ties to Seattle's wealthiest families. They were being sued by a coalition of environmental groups and low-income community advocates. The coalition was fighting to protect the residents living near the Duwamish River, fiercely opposing Evergreen's plan to build a luxury waterfront resort. Their argument was clear. The project would bulldoze a protected wetland and, even worse, displace dozens of working-class families from their homes to make way for multi-million-dollar condos. The court battle was brutal, but Liam won. Evergreen's resort was approved, the families were served eviction notices, and my father's firm collected a staggering legal fee. So there I was at the party celebrating that victory. When I finally located my assigned table, the air rushed out of my lungs. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. They had seated me at the absolute edge of the ballroom, shoved into a forgotten corner right next to a narrow service corridor that led to the kitchen. A large, industrial-sized trash can stood just a few feet away, and the sour smell of discarded food hung in the air. I froze. The other people at my table were complete strangers, probably friends of Liam's, all sipping their wine in an awkward silence, making no effort to speak to one another. My eyes were drawn to the front of the room, to the main stage where my parents and Liam were holding court with the city's elite, their laughter echoing across the hall. The tables up there were draped in shimmering white silk, decorated with towering, magnificent floral centerpieces. My table had a wrinkled paper cloth and a single sad little vase holding a few drooping carnations. I sank into my chair, trying to force down the bitter wave of humiliation that was rising in my throat. It's just an oversight, I tried to tell myself. A simple mistake, but a cold certainty was already settling in my gut. I knew it wasn't. I had seen the look on Liam's face when he'd invited me, a flicker of a smirk that I now understood completely. He thought he was doing me a charity. Still, I had to be sure. I walked back to the front, my steps feeling heavy and slow, and found the hostess again. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight. "I think there might have been a mistake with the seating. I'm at table 22 next to the service entrance." Her response was instant and delivered without a hint of apology. "There's no mistake, Mr. Miller. Your brother arranged that seating for you personally. He said that's where he wanted you." I fought to keep my expression neutral, but her words felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind right out of me. Liam, my little brother, the same kid I used to build elaborate driftwood forts with on the shores of the Puget Sound, he had intentionally, deliberately shoved me into the shadows. Not just in our family life, but here, tonight, on what was supposed to be his happiest day. He wanted me to know my place. The party started in earnest. I tried to eat the appetizer that was placed in front of me. A pathetic little salad with a few limp greens and a single pale slice of tomato. But the food felt like ash in my mouth. My gaze kept drifting back to the center of the room where Liam stood like a king, holding a champagne flute and laughing with a circle of powerful attorneys. He looked every bit the star. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hair was immaculate, and he had that same confident, almost predatory smile I recognized from the cover of a legal journal. My father stood right next to him, one hand resting proudly on his shoulder, while my mother glided from one influential guest to another, beaming as she introduced her successful son. A hollow feeling spread through my chest. Had they even noticed I'd arrived? Or was I just a name they'd felt obligated to check off a list, a duty fulfilled? Then came the speeches. My father took the stage, holding the microphone with the practiced ease of a man who owned every room he entered. "Today is a truly special day," he began, his powerful voice filling the vast hall. "We are not just here to celebrate Liam's 35th birthday. We are here to celebrate his greatest professional triumph to date. A landmark legal victory that any attorney would spend their entire career dreaming of." The room exploded with applause, punctuated by a few enthusiastic whistles from the crowd. Liam dipped his head in a show of false modesty, but I could see the triumphant glint in his eyes. He was savoring every single moment. Dad continued, weaving a grand narrative of Liam's journey. From his stellar performance in law school to his inevitable rise as the chosen heir to the family firm. He spoke for 10 minutes. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge Terraform or the fact that I had been named Seattle's Innovative Entrepreneur of the Year just a few months before. My hands curled into tight fists beneath the table, my knuckles white. It felt like I was being methodically erased from my own family's history, edited out of the official record. Next, it was Liam's turn. He strode onto the stage, his smile blindingly bright under the spotlights, and launched into his thank yous, expressing his deep gratitude to our parents, his friends, and his esteemed colleagues. I sat there, holding my breath, waiting. I was hoping for just one small acknowledgement. Something, anything, even a simple, "My brother David is here tonight and I'm proud of what he's building." But there was nothing, not a word. Liam spoke at length about the big case, about the all-nighters spent poring over legal documents, about how his work was reshaping the legal landscape in Seattle. When he finally finished, the entire room rose to its feet in a thunderous standing ovation. I remained in my chair, invisible, feeling more like a ghost than a living person. Honestly, I had no intention of causing a scene. My only plan was to slip away unnoticed, to get in my car, drive home, and try to scrub the memory of this entire humiliating night from my mind. But as I pushed my chair back and stood up to get my coat, one of the other men at my forgotten table, an older gentleman with a neatly trimmed silver beard and kind, inquisitive eyes, looked up at me. "You're David Miller, aren't you?" he asked. "The fellow who makes that incredible furniture out of reclaimed materials?" I was so taken aback I could only nod. "I read a feature about your company in the Puget Sound Business Journal," he continued, a genuine warmth in his voice. "Really fantastic work you're doing." His words were a tiny flicker of light in a vast, suffocating darkness, but they also lit a fuse. A hot, angry fire began to burn in my chest. If a complete stranger could see my value, could recognize my hard work, then why couldn't my own family? Why? I started walking. My feet carried me straight toward Liam, who was now holding court by the bar, surrounded by a circle of admirers. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. "Liam," I called out, my voice louder than I intended, loud enough that the people closest to us stopped talking and turned to look. He spun around and the practiced, charming smile on his face faltered the second he saw me. The mask slipped. "I was at a table next to the garbage," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting right through the pleasantries. "Was that your doing?" The chatter around us died completely. A pocket of thick, uncomfortable silence formed as people shamelessly paused their conversations to listen in. Liam recovered quickly, his lips curling into that familiar, infuriating smirk, the one that was equal parts arrogance and derision. "You should be grateful you got an invitation at all," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Not everyone gets to come to an event like this, especially not someone who glues together little trinkets out of scrap wood." A few people in his circle actually snickered, their laughter turning my blood to ice. I was the butt of the joke, but Liam wasn't finished. "What does your little company even make in a year? A few 100,000 maybe?" He gestured around the grand room. "My last deal was worth more than 10 times your company's entire annual revenue. You need to learn your place, David." Every word was a shard of glass. I just stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of every eye in that room on me. They were all waiting, watching to see if I would shatter or if I would turn and flee. But in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It clicked into place. It wasn't a hot flash of anger that washed over me, but a cold, sudden clarity. My entire life I had been running on a hamster wheel, desperately trying to earn their approval, to prove that I was worthy of their love. But standing there in front of my brother and his audience of sycophants, I realized I couldn't be silent 1 second longer. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to make a scene. All I had to do was speak my truth. I looked Liam dead in the eye, my voice quiet but honed to a razor's edge. "My place?" I repeated his words back to him. "My place is being the guy who built a company from absolutely nothing, with no help from mom and dad, no gifted house, no brand new car handed to me." My gaze didn't waver. "Terraform isn't little trinkets, Liam, it's my dream. It's a real business that's actually changing how people think about design and sustainability." "And you?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You think your money and your name make you a better man than me? You are so wrong." The ballroom fell utterly silent. The only sounds were the soft, distant notes of the jazz trio and the rustle of a few shocked whispers from the nearest tables. Liam was stunned into silence, the smug grin wiped clean from his face, replaced by a look of shocked disbelief. I braced myself for the counterattack, for the familiar volley of mockery I knew so well. But before he could find his voice, I heard my father's, booming and authoritative, from just behind me. "David, that is enough." He strode forward, parting the crowd like the Red Sea. He was immaculate in his tuxedo, his eyes as cold and hard as a judge's gavel. My mother was right at his side, her lips a thin, tight line, her emerald green gown glittering under the chandeliers. It felt like the whole room held its breath, sensing that the Miller family's private war was about to go public. I turned to face them. My chest felt tight, constricted, but I stood my ground. I would not back down. Not this time. "What do you think you're doing, David?" my father demanded, his voice low but carrying the full force of his courtroom command. He was looking at me like I was a hostile witness. "This is your brother's birthday party. It is a day to celebrate his achievements. Why are you trying to ruin it by making a scene?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Ruin it," I thought, the words echoing in my head. "I'm ruining it?" I looked from my father to my mother, searching her face for any sign of understanding, any flicker of maternal compassion. All I found was a deep, weary disappointment. She just shook her head slowly. "David, you should be happy for Liam," she said, her voice softer than my father's but just as sharp with reproach. "Your brother has accomplished something incredible. Can't you see that everyone is here to celebrate him? Why must you always make a fuss?" "Make a fuss?" The words came out of me raw and incredulous. "Mom, Dad, I'm just telling the truth. Liam humiliated me. In front of all these people, he called my life's work worthless and deliberately sat me next to the kitchen garbage. I'm not the one ruining anything. He did that the moment he decided I was disposable." Liam, who had been standing silently a few feet away, let out a small, contemptuous snort. But my father shot him a look and raised a hand, silencing him before he could speak. "That's enough, David," Dad said, his voice now devoid of all warmth, as cold and hard as granite. "You have always been overly sensitive. Liam was making a joke, and you're turning it into a melodrama. Do you have any idea how many important people are in this room? They came here to celebrate your brother," he continued, his voice dropping to a furious whisper, "and you are embarrassing this entire family." I stood there, my blood running hot and cold at the same time. Embarrassing the family? I looked past him to my mother, a last desperate hope that she would intervene, that she would offer some shred of fairness. Instead, she reached out and took Liam's hand, pulling him closer to her side as if he were the one who had been wronged. "David, please," she said, her voice now pleading, which was somehow worse than her anger. "Just go back to your table and try to behave. Don't make this any worse than it already is." A scream was building in my throat. I wanted to unleash it, to demand to know why Liam was always the one to be defended, why my own struggles, the years of bone-deep exhaustion, the nights spent sleeping on an office sofa, the massive contracts I had won with my own 2 hands, were never ever worthy of a single word of praise from them. But the scream died before it could escape. I said nothing, not because I was scared, but because in that moment the final painful truth settled over me like a shroud. In their world, I would always be the lesser son. I was the one who didn't follow in Dad's footsteps, the one who wasn't bringing in millions like Liam. I took one long, slow breath, turned my back on all of them, and walked out of the Fairmont Olympic. The curious stares and hushed, gossiping whispers followed me all the way to the door. But for the first time in my life, I truly didn't care. I just needed to escape. I needed air. When I finally got back to my small apartment, the familiar scent of old coffee and drafting paper greeted me at the door. I collapsed onto the sofa, not even bothering to take off my damp, wrinkled suit, and flipped open my laptop. Liam's words echoed in my mind, a cruel, repeating loop. Not everyone gets to come to an event like this, especially not someone who glues together little trinkets out of scrap wood. The anger I felt wasn't just at him for thinking I was a failure. It was a deeper, more profound rage. It was because he had said it out loud for everyone to hear. It was because my own family, my father, my mother, my brother, had spent years making me feel like a footnote in my own life. I navigated to LinkedIn, the platform where I shared news about Terraform and kept in touch with Seattle's vibrant entrepreneurial scene. My hands hesitated over the keys for only a moment, and then I started to type. To my fellow Seattle entrepreneurs, I began. My tone wasn't one of anger or bitterness. It was quiet and direct, as if I were sitting across a table from a trusted friend, finally ready to tell my story. Tonight I went to my brother Liam Miller's birthday party, I wrote. He's a celebrated attorney, and the event was also a celebration of his recent victory in the Evergreen development case. I went there hoping to connect with him, to maybe close some of the distance that has grown between us. Instead, I was seated quite literally next to a garbage can. In front of hundreds of people, I was publicly mocked for the work I do. I continued, the words flowing freely now. Terraform Interiors, the company I built from scratch, is not just recycled wood trinkets and, as my brother so dismissively called it, it is a company that stands for something. It stands for sustainability, for innovation, and for creating real value without destroying communities or crushing people in the process. I have spent my entire adult life trying to prove my worth to my family, but tonight I finally understood something. Real respect doesn't come from desperately trying to please the people who are supposed to love you. It comes from staying true to your own values and your own vision. I'm not writing this post for pity or to attack anyone, I concluded. I'm writing it to ask a question. How are we supposed to build a supportive community of founders and creators who lift each other up when our own families can be the first to tear us down? I stared at the screen for a moment, then clicked post. I had no idea what the fallout would be. I only knew that I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to let someone somewhere know that I existed, that I was not invisible. I shut the laptop, took a long, hot shower, and crawled into bed. But sleep was a distant country I couldn't reach. All night, images from the party flickered behind my closed eyes like a horror film on a loop. Liam's condescending smirk, my mother's strained society smile, the cold, glittering light of the chandeliers that seemed to mock my very presence. The next morning, I woke up groggy and unrested to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. It was a storm of LinkedIn notifications. My post had exploded overnight. In just a few hours, it had amassed over 500 likes and nearly 200 comments. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to pound, and began to scroll. A well-known local entrepreneur, the founder of a successful organic food company, had written, "David, I was at the party last night and I witnessed how your brother treated you. It was shameful. Terraform is an inspiration to so many of us in this city. You deserve nothing but respect." Another comment from a designer I admired read, "I've had dealings with Liam Miller's firm before. His only concern is the bottom line, not the human cost. Thank you for having the courage to speak up." Reading comment after comment like these, a slow, spreading warmth filled my chest. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt seen. I felt validated. But the real shock came when the conversation in the comments section began to pivot, with people starting to dig deeper into the details of Liam's big lawsuit. One user, who identified themselves as a member of the environmental coalition that had fought the Evergreen development project, posted a long, detailed comment. "Liam Miller is not the hero the media is making him out to be," it began. "He represented a corporation that was hell-bent on destroying a vital local wetland and evicting dozens of families from their homes, all so they could build condos for the super-rich. And for what? For a massive legal fee." That comment immediately blew up, attracting hundreds of likes and replies, with others chiming in to share details about the case that I had never heard before. Then another comment appeared that made my blood run cold. It was from someone claiming to be a former paralegal at my father's firm. I saw Liam Miller personally turn down a case for a group of factory workers who had been wrongfully terminated, the Post read. He said their case wasn't profitable enough to be worth his time. He only works for the wealthy. I sat there staring at the screen in disbelief. Liam, my little brother, the one who used to share his Halloween candy with me, was being painted as a ruthless, profit-obsessed shark who would happily sell out his principles to serve the city's elite. Within a single day, my post had been viewed nearly 10,000 times and shared over 1,000 times. The comments kept pouring in. One read, "Liam Miller thinks he's a star for winning that evergreen case, but he never stops to think about the cost to real people." "Working families lost their homes," another user added, "and a precious piece of our local environment was destroyed." Meanwhile, his brother, David Miller, is building a company dedicated to protecting the environment. Tell me, who is the real hero here? I read those words with a strange mix of vindication and a growing sense of guilt. I had never intended for Liam to become the focus of a public takedown, but the simple truth I'd shared had ignited a wildfire, and that fire was about to become an inferno. The tipping point came when Olivia Chen, the celebrated owner of the Cascadia Plates restaurant group and one of Liam's biggest clients, weighed in. Olivia was a titan in the Seattle business world, famous for her commitment to supporting sustainable and ethical local companies. I'd met her once, briefly, at an industry conference after Terraform had designed the interior for one of her new locations. I remembered seeing her at the party, sitting at one of the VIP tables right next to Liam. The following afternoon, she posted a statement on her own LinkedIn page. "I recently retained Liam Miller and his firm for a significant legal matter, based on their public reputation," she wrote. However, after what I personally witnessed at his party the other night and after learning more about the human and environmental cost of the Evergreen development case, I am terminating our contract effective immediately. Cascadia Plates will not do business with individuals who so clearly lack basic integrity. Her post was like throwing gasoline on the fire. It was shared hundreds of times within the hour. The local business community turned on Liam with a vengeance. People started calling him the 1%er's lawyer. And some of the comments were even harsher, labeling him a soulless opportunist. The consequences were swift and brutal. Several of Liam's other high-profile clients, including a major Seattle tech firm, issued public statements announcing that they were re-evaluating their relationship with his law firm. The Seattle Times, the same paper that had sung his praises just weeks before, ran a new front-page story with the headline, "Liam Miller's Big Win. A victory for justice or just for the rich?" The article took a much deeper, more critical look at the Evergreen case, featuring interviews with some of the displaced families and environmental activists whose voices had been silenced in the courtroom. One quote, from a single mother who had lost her home, hit me like a punch to the gut. "Liam Miller never even looked at us in court," she said, her voice breaking in the recorded interview. "To him, we weren't people. We were just obstacles in the way of his client's billion-dollar project." Reading her words, a profound sadness washed over me. I had never wanted Liam to fail, not really, but I also couldn't deny the truth. He had chosen this path for himself, and it was a path I would never, ever walk. While the Seattle business world was erupting online, my family was not about to sit quietly on the sidelines. That evening, I was in my apartment trying to lose myself in a new design concept for a hotel in Portland when my phone rang. My father's name lit up the screen. I froze, my thumb hovering over the green button. A part of me screamed to just let it go to voicemail, but I knew that delaying the inevitable would only make it worse. I took a breath and answered, "David." My father's voice was ice. It was sharp enough to cut. "Do Do you have any idea what you have done? He demanded without any preamble. The entire city is talking about that post. The firm's clients are calling, demanding answers. You have destroyed Liam's reputation. You have destroyed this family's reputation. You have taken a wrecking ball to the firm I spent 30 years of my life building. I sat bolt upright, my own heart beginning to race. Dad, I said, fighting to keep my voice even despite the crushing pressure in my chest. I just told the truth. Liam humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, and you and Mom stood there and defended him. I have spent my entire life trying to win your approval, and what did it get me? A seat next to the garbage. Do you have any idea how that feels? My father let out a long, heavy sigh. You always exaggerate, David. You blow everything out of proportion. Liam was teasing you. You didn't have to turn a silly joke into a public crucifixion. Have you stopped for 1 second to think about the damage you've caused? Liam is hemorrhaging clients. Major partners at the firm are questioning his leadership. Are you really willing to destroy your own brother's career because of a little wounded pride? I bit down hard on my lip, trying to choke back the hot wave of anger that was surging through me. Wounded pride? I shot back. Dad, this has nothing to do with my pride. This is about respect. It's about basic human decency. I built Terraform from the ground up with no help from you or Mom, not a single penny, not one word of encouragement. And all the while, Liam got a house, a car, and an endless parade of praise. All I ever wanted was for my own family to see me, to just see me, but you never have. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a foolish, fleeting second, I thought he might actually be considering my words, that he might offer some small concession. But then he spoke again, his voice as unyielding as ever. David, you are going to apologize to Liam. Publicly. You will write another post and you will say that you overreacted, that you misunderstood the situation. If you do not do this, then you will be held personally responsible for every single client this firm loses. He hung up before I could even form a response. I just sat there staring at my phone, the silence in my apartment suddenly feeling deafening. It wasn't even an hour later when my mother called. Her tone was gentler, but it was laced with that same familiar weary reproach. David, you know I love you, she began. But why would you do this to your brother? He is under so much pressure right now. He worked so hard on that evergreen case, and now people are attacking him from all sides, all because of what you wrote. Can you imagine how much that must hurt him? I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, fighting to keep my voice from trembling. Mom, I never wanted it to get this out of control, but do you even understand what Liam did? He represented a company that threw working families out of their homes just so they could build luxury condos. He chose a paycheck over people. And when I finally stood up for myself, you and Dad immediately took his side and blamed me. Why is no one asking Liam why he felt the need to publicly humiliate me? I asked, my voice cracking. My mother sighed again, a sound heavy with exhaustion. David, Liam isn't perfect, but he is your brother. Family is supposed to stick together no matter what. You can't keep being so jealous of his success. Jealous. The word was a tiny, sharp needle that pierced right through me. I wasn't jealous of Liam. I had never been jealous of him. I just wanted to be seen. I just wanted a fraction of the acknowledgement they so freely gave to him. Mom, I said, my voice now thick and hoarse. I am not jealous. I'm just tired. I'm so tired of constantly having to fight to prove that I'm worthy of being your son. I ended the call. I couldn't bear to hear another word. Liam, for his part, did not remain silent. The next morning, a new post appeared on his LinkedIn profile. I am deeply disappointed by the recent unfounded criticism directed at me and my family's law firm, he wrote. The Evergreen development case was a complex but legitimate legal victory, and it was handled with the highest degree of professionalism. I am proud to have vigorously defended my client's interests, and I will continue to do so in the future. Baseless accusations from a few disgruntled individuals will not change the facts of the matter. He didn't use my name, but everyone knew exactly who a few disgruntled individuals was meant to be. The comments section beneath his post was a war zone. Some people rallied to his defense, praising his tenacity and his warrior spirit. But many others continued to hammer him, digging up more and more unflattering details about the Evergreen case and his firm's track record. After about 2 weeks, the initial frenzy of public debate began to die down, the way a relentless Seattle downpour eventually softens to a drizzle and then stops. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, sodden quiet that comes after a devastating flood. The landscape had been permanently altered. There was no going back to the way things were. While the story was no longer front-page news, my original LinkedIn post continued to be shared, and my reputation within the Seattle business community had been transformed. I was no longer seen as just Liam Miller's quiet, artistic older brother. I had become David Miller, the founder of Terraform Interiors. The man who had been brave enough to speak his truth, even if it meant standing up to his own family. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my small office at Terraform, sifting through the usual pile of emails, when a message from an unfamiliar address caught my eye. The sender was named Rebecca Vance, and her title was Director of Sustainability for Summit Hotels, a luxury chain with properties all over the Pacific Northwest. "Dear David," the email began, "I read your recent post on LinkedIn and I was incredibly impressed by your courage and your commitment to your values. Summit Hotels is actively seeking to partner with companies that share our dedication to environmental stewardship, and we would be very interested in discussing the possibility of using Terraform's furniture in our upcoming renovation projects." I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding in my chest. Summit Hotels wasn't just another client. They operated more than 20 properties from Vancouver down to San Francisco. A contract with them would be a game changer. It would catapult Terraform to a whole new level. I took a deep breath and replied immediately, my fingers flying across the keyboard, trying to keep my tone cool and professional, when all I wanted to do was leap out of my chair and yell with joy. That was only the beginning. Within a week, 3 more emails just like that one had landed in my inbox. An organic food company based in Portland wanted to explore a collaboration on sustainable packaging. A local university invited me to be the keynote speaker at their annual conference on ethical entrepreneurship. And then came the one that truly stunned me. A venture capital fund that had turned me down flat 2 years ago reached out, offering to invest a significant amount of capital to help me scale up Terraform's production. "We misjudged you, David," the fund's managing partner wrote in a personal email. "Your story and the mission of Terraform is exactly the kind of founder-led vision we want to get behind." I just sat there looking at my screen at the flood of opportunities pouring in. It felt like the world was finally cracking open for me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to escape Liam's long shadow. I was standing in my own light, and it was blinding. In the fiercely competitive world of Seattle startups, Terraform suddenly became a symbol, a testament to what it meant to build a business with integrity. At a big networking event a few weeks later, I was asked to get up on stage and share my story. As I stood there under the warm lights and talked about the early days, about sleeping on that lumpy office sofa, about the constant dismissal from my family, about pouring my entire soul into building Terraform from the ground up, the room erupted in applause. It was genuine, and it was loud. After I stepped down, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, the owner of a popular local bakery, came up and took my hand. "I was at Liam's birthday party," she said, her voice soft. "I saw what happened. You're not just a gifted designer, David. You're an inspiration to all of us." Her simple, heartfelt words hit me with such force that I felt my throat tighten. All these years I had been starved for validation from the people who were supposed to love me most. But now, here in this room full of strangers, this community of people who shared my passion and my values, I was finally getting what my own family had never been able to give me. While Terraform was soaring, the law firm my father and Liam had built was in a nosedive. The damage from my post and the subsequent social media firestorm wasn't just a matter of whispers and bad press. After Olivia Chen publicly pulled her massive contract, other major clients got spooked and started to follow her lead. A Seattle-based tech company, a client my father had personally courted for years, released a public statement announcing they were putting their relationship with the firm under review. A national retail giant, which had been on the verge of signing a major retainer with Liam, abruptly backed out of the deal, citing reputational concerns. I didn't hear any of this directly from my father or Liam, of course. The news came to me through an old college friend who was now a partner at another downtown law firm. "Your dad's firm is in freefall, David," he told me over the phone one afternoon. "Liam is trying to hold on to a few of his legacy clients, but his reputation is in tatters. Around town, people are calling him the 1%er's lawyer." The media wasn't letting go of the story either. They kept digging into the Evergreen development case. An investigative piece in The Stranger featured long interviews with the environmental activists involved, one of whom described Liam as a soulless legal machine completely devoid of a conscience. The woman who had led the coalition fighting the development told the reporter, "Liam Miller knew exactly what that resort would do. He knew it would destroy a vital ecosystem and ruin the lives of dozens of families. He just didn't care. All he cared about was the money." The article even included a leaked internal email from an Evergreen executive who praised Liam for his efficiency in clearing the obstacles, a chillingly detached reference to the human beings and the natural habitat that stood in his way. Reading those words, a profound wave of grief washed over me. This was Liam, my little brother. The kid who used to chase me down the beach on Vashon Island, his laughter echoing in the salt air as we built sandcastles until the tide came in. The person described in that article was a complete stranger to me, someone who had been swallowed whole by a world of power and money, a world where concepts like empathy and justice had ceased to have any meaning. Liam tried to do damage control. About a week after my post, he agreed to appear on a local political talk show, hoping to rehabilitate his image. The Evergreen development case was a fair and just legal outcome, he said, his voice as smooth and practiced as a politician's. I represented my client with the utmost integrity and professionalism. The recent attacks against me have been deeply unfair and entirely personal. But the viewers weren't buying it. The live comment feed scrolling alongside the video was brutal. Dozens of people were challenging his ethics, bringing up his firm's well-known refusal to take on pro bono work for low-income clients, and of course, hammering him about how he had treated me at the party. One comment in particular seemed to cut through his composure. "Liam," it read, "have you apologized to your brother for publicly humiliating him? Or do you only say you're sorry when it starts costing you money?" The question shot to the top of the feed, racking up hundreds of likes in seconds. On screen, Liam tried to hold his smile, but I could see it, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He was rattled. My parents, however, remained steadfast. One evening, there was a knock on my door. It was my mother. It was the first time she had ever set foot in my apartment. She stood on the welcome mat, still wearing her expensive wool coat, looking completely out of place. Her eyes were tired, ringed with shadows. "David," she said, her voice strained and raspy. "You need to make this stop. What you are doing is tearing this family apart. Liam is suffering. Your father's firm is in crisis. Have you given any thought to us at all?" I opened the door wider and invited her in. I made her a cup of tea, but the silence between us was stretched so tight I thought it might snap. "Mom," I said finally, my voice quiet. "I don't want to destroy anything. I never did. All I ever wanted was to be treated with a little bit of respect. Liam made his own choices, and if those choices are now having consequences, that isn't my fault." She just shook her head, her knuckles white as she gripped the teacup. "You don't understand, David," she insisted. "Liam needs our support right now. He is the future of this family." A familiar ache spread through my chest. "And what about me, Mom?" I asked, the words barely a whisper. "Am I a part of this family too?" She didn't answer. She just stood up, placed the untouched cup of tea back on the coffee table, and walked out of my apartment. The click of the closing door echoed in the sudden, heavy silence. The teacup she left behind sat on the table for a long time, its warmth long since faded, a perfect metaphor for what was left of my relationship with my family. I wasn't angry anymore, not at my mother or my father or even at Liam. I was just tired, a bone-deep exhaustion from a lifetime spent trying to earn a place at their table, a lifetime spent trying to be seen. And so today, sitting here in my office, watching the rain streak down the window pane, I find myself thinking about it all. Not about the new contracts or the partnership offers or the public firestorm that upended Liam's life. I'm thinking about what I've learned through all of this, and what I hope I can share with anyone else out there who has ever been made to feel invisible. For so long, I believed that my value as a person was tied directly to my family's approval. I spent decades twisting myself into knots trying to make them proud, trying to earn Liam's respect, trying to prove that my passion for sustainable design was more than just the silly little hobby they always dismissed it as. But that night, at Liam's birthday party, standing in that ballroom while he mocked me and my parents rushed to his defense, something finally broke free. I realized that recognition from others, whether it's from your family, your friends, or the world at large, is not what defines you. Your worth is not something that can be given to you or taken away. It lives inside you. It's in your principles, in the dreams you have the courage to pursue, and in the strength you find to get back on your feet after you've been knocked flat. When I wrote that LinkedIn post, when I laid bare the truth of how my own family treated me, I never imagined that the entire city would pay attention. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I just wanted to be heard, for once in my life. I just wanted to speak my truth. But what happened next was so much more than I could have ever expected. An entire community of fellow entrepreneurs and creators rose up to support me. A tribe of strangers who, it turned out, shared my belief in integrity and sustainability. They taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to walk alongside you, who see you for who you are. When Olivia Chen made the decision to cancel her $500,000 contract with Liam, she wasn't just defending me. She was making a stand. She was sending a clear message that in business, as in life, respect is not a negotiable commodity. I learned that when you treat people with contempt, that disrespect doesn't just wound them. Eventually, it circles back and poisons you. But the most important lesson I learned had nothing to do with Liam, or my parents, or what happened that night at the Fairmont Olympic. It was about discovering a strength inside myself that I never knew I had. When I finally stood up to my brother, when I typed out those words on my laptop, I wasn't just defending my pride, I was defending my dream. I was defending my very self. Terraform Interiors is more than just a company to me, it's my proof. It's proof that you can build something valuable and successful without having to tear other people down. It's proof that you can make a real difference in the world, even if it's just one chair, one table, one piece of reclaimed wood at a time. And in building it, I found my people. A community of young designers, of ethical entrepreneurs, of dreamers who all believe, as I do, that a better, more thoughtful world is possible. So if you're reading this, if you have ever felt unseen or unheard, this is what I want to tell you. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to be worthy. Don't let the cold shoulders or the dismissive words of anyone, not your family, not your friends, not the world, make you question your own value. Stand up, even if your hands are shaking, even if your voice trembles. Speak your truth, not because you're trying to win a fight, but because your story deserves to be told. You deserve to be heard. And find your people, find the community that will lift you up, not out of obligation, but because they see the world the same way you do. I don't know if Liam and I will ever be brothers again, not in any real sense. I don't know if my parents will ever look at me and say the words I once longed to hear. David, we're proud of you. But the truth is, I don't need to hear them anymore. I'm standing here in my own office, surrounded by my own work, my own dreams. And I know finally that I am enough. I'm David Miller, the founder of Terraform Interiors. I'm the man who learned how to value himself even when his own family couldn't. And if I can find that strength, I know that you can too.